by the Hamilton Youth Poets, AK. AK is a Nigerian-born poet and rapper. When he isn't studying economics of mastery, he's dedicating time to creating music and improving his writing as a whole. As a member of the Hamilton Youth Poet team, AK was able to compete at the Voices of Today Festival during the summer of 2017, where the Hamilton Youth Poets was able to take home the first place trophy. He prides himself on using his command of the English language to spread messages supporting individuality and chasing your dreams, chasing his dreams through both his poetry and through his music. Thank you.
How's everybody feeling right now? Do some quick mic checks, Check. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, I like it. All right, everybody's feeling good right now? Woo! We hear another round of applause for Kylie, please. So basically, a lot of my work spawns from mental breakdowns, funny enough. A lot of my work, the pieces I'm going to show today are more centered around the way people feel or looked at in society. So the first, I'm going to do a poem first, and it's called Black Boys Not Surviving Depression. A lot of people can probably relate to this. What's good and wagwan? I hope all men are blessed. It's your boy AK. I'm about to give y'all the Black Boys Guide to Surviving Depression. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to show y'all how to become the strong and confident black man you're meant to be. But don't worry, disclaimer, it's not up to you. It's life or death out here. So sag your pants, run your black power, visit Afro comb through your coarse nappy hair, and get ready to go from zero to Negro. Step 1, eliminate your emotions. Unless you're expressing a bitter hate for any and all Caucasian creations, nobody wants to hear you speak. Unless you're singing love songs about your beautiful black sisters, making them feel like the queens they really are, you better make like a jacket and zip it. There's way too many terrible things going on right now for you to be depressed, because that's how depression works. You better not feel messed up on the inside, because the world is already a messed up place. Our race can only consist of fighters. Your ancestors went through slavery, spending hours suffering under the hot sun, seldom speaking words of self-pity. So whatever's going on in your life just can't be that bad. Still scared you might not make it? Those who came before you synthesized a solution. Sing your way through the pain. It worked for them, so it'll work for you. Like, boy, you need to get your ish together, because we don't get depression. Step 2, seek wisdom from the previous generation, because if anybody knows what to do about your depression, it's someone who never acknowledged their own. Be prepared for life-changing anecdotes to go a little something like this. Depression. What is depression? Back in my day, we didn't have food. We didn't have water, and we didn't have any depression, Step 3, fake it till you make it. Put on a mask, because if you pretend hard enough, you can actually think you are, and gangsters don't feel sadness. Warm up your cold feet with the newest heat out of Michael Jordan's sweatshops. Extinguish the fear and paranoia burning deep inside your body with the iciest change money can buy. Dry your sorrows with liquor, because anything is possible. And masking need for love and affection with fighting words, because using violence and ignorance to mask self-hate always seems to end well. Step 4, goes to the OG, the close with the most. He didn't have no father, and he walked on water, drank crystal himself, Jesus. Yes, the ultimate key to ultimately escaping your bogus self-created prison is Jesus. Disclaimer. If you don't see any changes after years of repentance and confession, don't be alarmed. The Lord is known to take his sweet time. And then you have the Black Boys Guide to Surviving Depression. If you act now, I'll bless you with all types of sick bonus tips, such as you can only cry 3 times. When your grandmama dies, when your mama dies, and if you really have to, on your wedding day, because you are a black boy, and if you want to have even the slightest chance to survive in this world, you ain't allowed to be anything else but strong. Thank you. So, like I was saying, a lot of my stuff comes out of stress and mental breakdowns. So this next song I'm going to do is just something I came up with. I was going through some stuff. I should tell a joke. Yeah. Why did the chicken cross the road? Right on the side of the vegan. familiarity. We've been through it before, the repetition seems stupid, I know. People asking why I never come around, I've been out of touch. Fresh from first year, still calling, wanna know what's up. Fresh from high school, noticing I've been growing up. But times are changing, excuse me if I'm abrasive through pages of whack words and personal stuff I lock away. I got a hard time saying stuff that I ought to say. I always wonder what it feels like to wake up in the morning feeling real nice. Cause nowadays I wake up in the PM, saw the sunrise, watching my idols and wishing that I could be them. My dad thinks it's a silly dream, cause how much money can pimpin' poetry really bring? I hate suicide doors, they remind me of the stuff I turn to suicide for. How poetic, sick of the weak stuff like diabetics. People coming to me broken and bruised like I'm a medic. I'm sick of being the crutches when I need someone to lean on. Grandmama in my head yelling, be strong. If you ever feeling weak, speak to God. Ain't got the heart to tell her no, cause every time I've tried, I've had my prayers denied. I'll wake up some simple questions I ask, but no reception. My last couple reflections been masked from your perception, cause I'm painting pictures of the same old view. A blank page never stained to the pain roll through. I've been painting pictures of the same old view. I swear I've been here before, blame it on deja vu. Look, painting pictures of the same old view. A blank page never stained to the pain roll through. I've been painting pictures of the same old view. I swear I've been here before, blame it on deja vu. Thank you.
Thank you so much, DJNO. It's fantastic. I'd like to invite the rest of DJNO up here. We're going to talk to you all a little bit about what the Disability Justice Network is, who we are, and what we hope to accomplish over the next few years, and how you can all contribute. So what brought us together? I met Shante and I had met during university. And we came together to start the Disability Justice Network because over the course of our lives, we recognized that there were gaps not being met, that there were lots of services for people with disabilities that exist, like March of Dimes, for example, or Autism Ontario. But where do you go if the services in place don't work for you? Where can you go to advocate if your very livelihood depends on some of these services, right? We also recognize, I think, through our various different experiences, that there are many issues that are centered when you talk about disability, and it's mostly this conversation around access, but it's never around justice. It's never about what do you do when your teachers are telling you that they don't think you can graduate school on time? What do you do when you start to learn that our justice system is not adequate enough? What do you do when you learn that a lot of people, a large proportion of people with disabilities are living in poverty? That there are issues with accessing mental health supports. Where do you go if the services in place do not work? Right? Because if you go to services to advocate for you, a lot of them are at risk of difference in funding.
That's right.
I think, so we came together to sort of talk about what are some ways we can center advocacy, to come together to show that the services in place aren't always the greatest. What are some ways that we can come together to build political capacity and clout and power as a community that has been divided and siloed over a history of institutions telling us that we do not have the right to be in these spaces?
So we just wanted to introduce yourselves before we got started. So I'm Shantia. I've worked outside and within health systems as a researcher and as an advocate for individuals who experience medical violence and sexual violence. And I center disability in my work. I'm driven by a vision of a transformed society where access and rights are just a starting point, and where dignity, liberty, and bodily autonomy and justice are an everyday reality for people with disabilities. My focus of study is in statistics, and I hope to use my technical skills to be able to elucidate some of the invisible problems that exist in the healthcare system around people with disabilities. And I hope to do some research around some community-based participatory research with DJNO as well.
My name is Sarah Gamma. I'm a community organizer in Hamilton, Ontario. I focus on a lot of different issues, but I realized that my passion around working around economic justice wasn't really being met, because oftentimes a lot of the gaps that I face the most come back to being a person living in a Black disabled body. And so this was a way for me to sort of come together and really focus on that.
My name is Eminette. I'm a social worker and I work in the homelessness sector. I have the privilege of working with and managing and teaching and growing with new social workers to the field. And my passions lay in research and using data to inform my practice and to inform the work that I do working with homeless men in the community. It's me again. So poverty, how's poverty and disability linked, and how is this relevant to DJNO? Unfortunately, disability and poverty often go hand in hand. People that are disabled are more likely to live in poverty, and people that live in poverty are more likely to develop disabilities, but also to have worsening conditions in their current disability. We just have up here the different models of working with people with disabilities, and there's a couple of outdated models there where we're talking about the charity model and looking at people with disabilities like they don't have capacity already and that they need help from charities. And the other model is the medical model, and that looks at people with disabilities as something to fix. So what we're trying to do is get away from both of those models and look at disability from a social justice lens, but also from the social model, where we're looking at society and the structures and barriers that we have that are already existing in society that are actually what is keeping people with disabilities from living the lives that they already desire to live and want to live and can live. And really we're working to advocate and to use research and our capacity to build capacity in people with disabilities and really just let them live the lives that they want to live. So housing is obviously linked to poverty. I work in the homelessness sector, like I said, and people in the homelessness sector, a lot of them have disabilities. A lot of estimates have us around 35 to 45%, and this was echoed in the recent point in time count. So the point in time count, for those of you that don't know, is a snapshot in time of a sample of people with disabilities. So it doesn't show everyone with disabilities in Hamilton, but it does show the people that we were able to find and talk to and ask questions about, and this is just a snapshot of what their demographics look like. And again, 45% of people with disabilities were having, experiencing homelessness. So for those with disabilities that are fortunate enough not to be homeless and are housed, they're often underhoused or they're living in housing that needs repairs. So if we're talking about people in social housing, often if they have an accessible unit, we're lucky to get an accessible unit, they're living in a unit that needs repairs, and in order to do that, you need to move that person to another accessible unit, and that is very, very hard to do in our current social housing system. So really just looking at how to remove those barriers from people that are living in environments where the housing needs to be repaired and they can't, just because they can't get interim housing that is accessible and suitable to their needs. Okay, so for education, the research side of my work, it's recently the Ontario Human Rights Council, they released a report about students with disabilities and their experiences. And about a year to a year and a half ago, I was working on research with the School of Social Work, and we completed focus groups with students in the School of Social Work with disabilities, and it really aligned with what was in that report. So when I talked to a lot of those students, they're like, I don't need to read that report, I already know what the experience is. And the experience is is a lot of the times students with disabilities are not trusted. They're not believed when they need accommodations, and then when they do get accommodations, they're not accommodations that are the ones they need. They're the ones that their professor or their faculty think they need. So it doesn't really help to get an accommodation that's not bringing you closer to the access into the education you want. We see the same thing when it's about students just being able to do placements. For example, we're had a really rough time finding students with disabilities appropriate placement opportunities where employers were able to accommodate their disabilities. So how do we provide students the access that they have a legal right to, while still having them meet the requirements of the role when we don't have faculties and entire institutions that are aligning their policies internally with letting students access the education they want. So we're working towards advocating for that, and again, using research to inform some of that practice and letting them know that it's not that hard to make things successful. You can see today's event and how we were able to, I'm not saying it's fully accessible, but we were able to look at it from different points of view and different experiences and try and find ways to make sure everyone is able to participate. So really advocating for just letting people participate and live the lives they want again.
Another issue that we know that people with disabilities face is that the healthcare system is and has been ableist. Healthcare professionals may have ableist attitudes towards people with disabilities, and the mental health and sexual health of people with physical disabilities are invisibilized, and the reproductive rights of people with disabilities have been attacked in the past. And institutionally, navigating the healthcare system as a person with a mental or physical disability becomes about advocating for one's right to health services in an environment that has been historically violent to them. So just thinking about the Huronia Regional Center, which only closed in 2009, and the gross abuses of power that happened there is justifiable mistrust in healthcare professionals and institutions. But we also have to acknowledge that healthcare is an institution that people with disabilities reluctantly rely on. And there are barriers that exist even before we get to the door. Acknowledging that one has an illness or a disability, knowing what services are available, getting appointments, and knowing your treatment options is a long process which relies on physical access to space as well as disabled people's community, family, friends, networks, and so on. Inevitably, because of that, people's class, race, gender, and ability plays into how people access health services, and this needs to change. And it's a complicated problem. And we, as people with disabilities, have to go beyond just accessing systems that don't work for us and have to imagine what could work for us. And that's some of the work that we hope to do with some of the research that we produce, as well as the programming and the workshops that we hope to run for healthcare professionals. And next, Sarah's going to talk about the criminal justice system.
So we know that people with disabilities are disproportionately represented in our criminal justice system. And we know that there have been a slew of, mistreatment of people with disabilities at the hands of, our criminal justice system. We know in the States, for example, there's a whole movement around making sure that people with disabilities, especially people of color who are deaf, are receiving adequate care and can communicate when they're being incarcerated or imprisoned, rightfully or wrongfully so. We also know that here in Canada, we have a lot of issues around, police interactions and people with disabilities. I'm thinking of your friend Abdi in Ottawa, who was a Somali man with autism, where his body was weaponized and he was assaulted by police. I'm thinking of Solomon Fakiri, who was a man with schizophrenia, who was racialized, who was, assaulted by prison guards in Lindsay, Ontario, when he was waiting for a hospital bed to free up, when he shouldn't have been in our prison system in the first place, when he should have got access to care. And we know that there are issues of not enough hospital beds being available and people being funneled into the criminal justice system. And we know there's a lack of proper communication and upholding of rights of people who are having to navigate the criminal justice system. And so these are some of the issues we're looking into as well, considering that we know the Stats Canada report came out in March recently saying that people with disabilities are, it's all good, I like those, that people with disabilities are twice as likely to be victims of violence hate crime, right? And some of that interaction with the criminal justice system plays into that. So I talked a little bit about violence. So we know that, again, the Stats Canada report that came out in March recently, it was very well done, but it said that people with disabilities are twice as likely to experience violence or hate crime, and if you have a visible disability, mental illness, or a cognitive disability, the stats are 4 times as much. So we know that there's a history and there's a current practice of people with disabilities experiencing different forms of violence, whether it's interpersonal, financial violence, sexual violence, which are also more likely to be experienced if you have a disability. And so these are some of the issues we want to address as well, knowing that there's a lot of stigma around talking about violence, knowing that people with disabilities are often made to feel as though we're making up experiences of violence. We want to create spaces for people to have these conversations, but also document hate crime happening locally, hopefully in Hamilton. So our vision as the Disability Justice Network of Ontario is to create a world where people with disabilities are free to be. So what does that really mean? We want to make sure that people with disabilities are, yeah, it's pretty dope. It took us like 8 hours to come up with this vision. It was a lot of going back and forth, but we were trying to figure out a way to encompass what it is we actually want to do with the Disability Justice Network of Ontario. We're not trying to sort of say that we speak from everybody's experiences. The 3 of us have different kinds of disabilities, different life experiences, grew up in different sorts of ways, but we just want to make sure that people with disabilities have the ability to exist the way that they choose, right? And are free to be the way that they are. And so that's our vision statement. We're going to also go into our mission statement, our value statements, and what we kind of want to do as an organization.
Okay, so our mission statement is up here. This also took several hours. So I'll just read them because I do think that they're important to kind of say out loud and get a sense of what we're talking about here. So, the Disability Justice Network of Ontario aims to build a just and accessible Ontario where people with disabilities can thrive and foster meaningful community relationships. People with disabilities can build power, capacity, and skills needed to hold people, communities, and institutions responsible for the spaces that they create. And people with disabilities have personal and political agency. So really, again, just reiterating that people with disability know what they need and what they want for their lives, and letting them build the capacity that they need to be able to do that.
And I would also add that it's not about us trying to mimic services that already exist. We're all about building community and personal political power. The reason that these spaces don't exist or are not accessible enough, or that we're still arguing with the City of Hamilton to create accessible spaces that are adequate, is because people with disabilities haven't been treated as though we have political capacity or personal capacity, that we're not a community, that we're meant to be divided. And so our mission statement is to basically build community, but also to make sure that we're empowering other people with disabilities to know that if you see an issue that's wrong, we're here to support you, but we're also here to help you learn to advocate or to advocate with you.
And I just want to go over some of our values. So our values are accountability and relevance. So we want to make sure that the work is community-led, not just, we don't just have community consultations, but we're actually led by the community members that are part of the network. And we want to be accountable to people with disabilities. And we want to build community power. So we always want to be working with in collaboration with people with disabilities, and partnering with community members and movements and organizations in order to collectively build power. And justice, it's in our name, goes beyond the individualistic and retroactive model of justice that we are accustomed to work beyond current legislation to center access, empowerment, and liberation for people with disabilities, including the creation of sustainable systems. So in terms of justice, often something goes wrong and we're asked to retroactively go ask for our rights. And that's something that framework tries to build a society wherein that is not put on people with disabilities, that burden is not put on people with disabilities. And so justice is like a central component of the Disability Justice Network. We also are open door, so we welcome people who support DJNO's vision, mission, and values, regardless of ability, race, religion, age, sexual orientation, gender, or economic status. Anyone can get involved, so get in contact with us. We also want to share resources between community members and movements and organizations. And in terms of self-determination, we really respect people's choices to build better futures for themselves, and this also includes the choice to disclose or discuss or manage their disability. Okay, so what do we hope to do? So we hope to do programming, education, activism, and research, and all of these things are kind of building on one another. So we want to start off by doing research, but most of it is community consultation, and again, building power in communities in order to figure out what our needs are. It's not about us figuring out what your needs are, it's about us figuring out what our needs are collectively, and in order to inform the education that we hope to bring back to the community in terms of workshops and programmings and community events, but also workshops to service providers, workshops to health service providers, workshops to schools, in order to have spaces, in order to build spaces that go beyond accessibility. Like I said, in order to have disability justice integrated in their practice as well. And that goes into some of the programming. And we also really want to do a lot of advocacy. We have some events coming up that Sarah will talk about. But in terms of advocacy, we want to have our pulse on the policies that are coming out, the research that's coming out, and have that inform our campaigns and the events that we do for the people in our community. And our year plan is coming up next. So like I said, we hope to do a lot of community-led research and focus groups, and this will come in the form of consultation and participation, which will go into education and eventually advocacy. So, as I said, programming will look like workshops for community members, workshops for organizations and institutions, and we hope to have some fun as well, because I think one of the biggest things about living with a disability is the isolation that we face, and not being able to access space, and not being able to access services, and we really want to be able to just build community and talk to one another about what we're experiencing. And the next one, so I just wanted to go into some of the stuff that I've been doing around, we've been doing around the environmental scan and the research. So there are a lot of services that already exist for people with disabilities, like Sarah said, and we want to uniquely position ourselves in that landscape in order to make the most impact. And we're currently in the process of mapping out those services and organizations, so we're not reproducing those services. In terms of research, we are structuring our research so that it is not extractive, and that it, as I said, it is collaborative. We're building this research together. And some, like for example, interest areas could be around access to housing, access to civic participation, access to healthcare, access to post-secondary education, access to sexual health education, and more. And these are topics that are invisibilized in research, so there aren't a lot of statistics that exist. There are some statistics, but in terms of really nuanced statistics that exist in Hamilton, there aren't much. And in being able to look at the problem and clearly elucidate the problem, we hope to be able to address the problem. And these workshops, these focus groups will also act as workshops. So while we are assessing the needs of the people in our focus groups, we're also giving them skills and resources to participate in the spaces that they feel excluded from. So for example, in terms of civic participation, we want to teach people how to vote as a person with a disability, or to run as a person with a disability, things that people are interested in, essentially. So this research The research produced from this project will also help people with disabilities better advocate for themselves in their communities in the identified areas of interest, so that we can go on and hopefully create policy and community interventions. Again, going back to it not just being an extractive process of research, like often universities tend to do. We really want to be able to build the research with the people and resource people while we're doing that, and then also using the outcomes of that research for policy and community interventions.
Cool. For the research, environmental STEM, we're also partnered with McMaster University and the school's social work through Emil Joseph's office. Cool. So we put this up here. This was a conference that we ran last year, which kind of helped us figure out where we wanted to focus on. It was called the Momentum Disability Conference, Disability Justice on Conference, and it was held on the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. And for that, we brought people from all over the province who submitted workshops that they wanted to run, whether it was art-focused or academic. We're talking about the history of disability justice. And then we had a workshop at the end where everybody got to a facilitated conversation about what the needs are in the province, but what also the needs are here locally in Hamilton. And that kind of helped us influence where we wanted to go with this Disability Justice Network organization. We just wanted to talk a little bit about future or upcoming events. So on the 22nd, Shantia has a presentation, or DJNO and Shantia are presenting at the McMaster Health Symposium on the medical industrial complex and disability justice. And then on the 22nd, DJNO will also be speaking at the Toronto Disability Pride Parade. We'll have some flyers at the registration table if anybody's interested. But there's a pretty cool lineup of speakers, and that will be in Toronto. In October, we'll also announce our Youth Advisory Council. So we're going to be talking about our applications in a little bit. We'll also be at MIT for the Disability and Intersectionality Summit, presenting there on a fun topic, eugenics in the disability community. It's a bit spicy. I recommend you watch the live stream. On the 20th, because there's an election, I don't know if you all know, but there is an election. We'll be running a Crypt the Vote campaign on social media, encouraging people with disabilities. No, anywhere, just online. We took the model from, we asked permission from Alex Wong and a bunch of organizers who developed the hashtag online, and the hashtag was created in San Francisco by organizers and activists with lived experience of disability who wanted to engage in the political process and hold elected officials or potential elected officials accountable, but couldn't really go out to debates. So they created this hashtag and started asking really targeted questions about what are you going to do with these issues? How are you going to center people with disabilities? What's your plan? And that hashtag pretty much went viral and started a whole online debate around where people plan to move forward. So we plan to adopt that hashtag and focus it hopefully in Hamilton, but anybody can participate with the hashtag. And we're going to run a campaign around that, hopefully on the week of the 20th, while people are engaged and getting ready to vote. Sorry, I'm nervous that I'm forgetting what I already know, but we are partnering as well with OCASI, the Ontario Coalition of Agencies Serving Immigrants, to do a focus group in Hamilton, an event, a roundtable, on the access needs of people with disabilities who are immigrants and refugees around access to housing, right? So what are the barriers that people face, particularly around trying to find affordable and accessible housing when you're already racialized and facing different barriers as newcomers and refugees. I know for myself, growing up, like in community housing, we had stairs, so that was fun all the time. I have a bladder still now because the bathroom was upstairs. But that's just to say that there are lots of issues that face people with disabilities when it comes to looking at housing, and particularly in Hamilton, that's a huge conversation. Gentrification and people being pushed out. Well, who's being left behind, right? So we're partnering with OCASI to run this event to collect information, and Acorn as well as a partner, who's doing a lot of tenant solidarity work and rights in Hamilton. will be announced, and anybody who's interested in participating can come out to that. We're also going to be doing a panel on gentrification with Centers 3, focused on gentrification and the issues that people with disabilities face. And in December, we're going to be having another focus group, and we're also going to be doing some sort of online campaign to commemorate the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. Have no fear, we're still doing the Momentum on Conference. It's just not going to be in December because last December we realized that the winter is hard. So we're going to do something online and move the Momentum Conference later on in the year, hopefully, where more people can participate with less barriers. And how you can get involved. Before this, awkwardly, before we go over, I'm just going to say one thing. I forgot to mention when we talked about how we got involved that we are funded through the Youth Opportunities Fund. That has to go in there somewhere. And oh, just carry on.
So you can get involved with the Youth Advisory Council. So if you're a young person aged 16 to 29 who identifies as having a disability, and you want to get involved in disability justice organizing, and you're interested in learning how to organize around disability and center race, class, gender, age in your organizing, get involved with the Youth Advisory Council, and the time commitment is going to be around 6 hours per week. Applications are due on October 5th. So you'll be able to really determine the trajectory of DJNO for the next year, and you'll be able to develop your skills in areas such as community organizing, public speaking, event planning, advocacy, research, group facilitation, and more. And while the position is voluntary, we will cover travel costs and provide honorariums if you are invited to speaking events, which you likely will be. And this is just a way for youth to get involved, but we don't just want to structure our DJNO around youth, we also want community members to get involved. And we're going to do that through the focus groups and the community-based participatory research model, where we are engaging not just youth, but everyone who has a disability in Hamilton can come out to those events. And also, we have our website launch that just happened. So if you want to get in contact with us, get on there and click the contact tab, I guess. Here we'll also be posting a lot of research and just summarizing policy that comes out regularly so that people in Hamilton are aware about what's happening. In terms of how you can get involved as a community partner, Sarah is just going to talk about that a little bit.
So one of the things that we should mention is that though we do plan on expanding across Ontario over time, what we do want to focus on is honing it locally here in Hamilton, in terms of the events that we are doing and what we're going to, in terms of how we're roping in our immediate community. And there are a number of reasons for that, but one of the reasons is because percentage-wise, Hamilton has some of the largest populations of people with disabilities across the whole province, if you compare cities. Number two is because it's important to sort of focus your work where you are locally. So though we're going to be collaborating with people across the province, we're going to be honing in on our work here. And one of the things we want to do is to create a network, to keep true to that network part of our name, and to make sure that we're not reinventing the wheel, and that every single organization or service who is working on disability stuff in Hamilton, or who cares about it, or where that's in your mission, vision, or values, we want to make sure that we're having meetings on a monthly basis with as many organizations in this network as possible to talk about, okay, collectively, how can we hone our resources to create a space where Hamilton is creating a world where people with disabilities are free to be, and then hopefully when we perfect that craft, when we're effectively roping in youth into their advocacy work and working with the nonprofit sector or organizations who are interested in getting involved in resourcing that as well, that kind of work, work, we'll expand our work out across the province over time. So if you're interested in getting involved in your own organization and not just an individual, it's a bit of a separate process. So we'd ask that you just send us your information or talk to one of us at the end of the night. We have cards now, they're really cool. You should take one. Yeah, and you can check out our website is live now at www.djno.ca to get in contact with us or Facebook us or tweet us. Yeah, well, no, not Instagram.